Good morning. How are you? Doing well? Awesome. Normally I ask, how's your show been? But this is the earliest I've ever presented at a reInvent, so hopefully over the next hour you're going to learn something. I am Kevin Goodman, the Director of Product Management at EUC, and together with my colleagues, Gigi Behringer and Ananda Christian, we're going to take you through the next hour how Lucid Motors streamline their migration to the cloud. Sound good? Yeah. All right. Let's go. They did it with a product called Workspaces Core. This is something that we shipped last year at reInvent. Was anybody there for that? Raise a hands. How about you in the overflow room? Good. Got it. Okay, so Workspaces Core, I'm going to give you an overview of it. Then we're just going to go straight into Lucid Motors and hear how they've succeeded with it. And then Gigi's going to do a deep dive for us, okay? And she's also going to tell you how you can get started. So it started because at AWS, especially EUC, we believe in flexibility, choice, and customer experience. We like to say we're going to meet the customer where they are and give them choice. Now, we think you do best with AWS as your primary cloud provider, but we know you have an investment on premises, and we want you to preserve that investment as long as you need to in your migration to the cloud. The other thing we think, and I've asked this question many times, I'll ask you, if you take care of users, how would you like to throw user turmoil into your cloud migration? Anybody? If you put your hand up, I don't believe you, okay? We believe in customer experience, and that goes all the way down to the user. Our users who use Workspaces Core, who migrate and preserve their on-premises experience with one of the existing VDI providers, our users don't even know they've been migrated. That's right. Go home on a Friday, doing your job, come in on a Monday, doing your job. That's the way it should be with users. We actually, in this one situation, we had a bunch of IT people standing around a nurse's station at this hospital. She swipes the patient's credit card and gets a receipt and checks them out, and then looked up at us and was like, what? Well, nothing at all. They had no idea, except maybe it went a little faster, right? Because now they had migrated to AWS. So, I've been talking about Workspaces Core. For those of you not familiar with it, let me go into it just a tiny bit. Gigi's going to give you a deep dive on it. But Workspaces Core, it's really a set of APIs on top of Amazon Workspaces. Amazon Workspaces was the first DaaS, and it's been around for 10 years. And we learned a few things over those 10 years. That's why we offer a financially backed SLA. Now, Workspaces Core enables your on-premises VDI to turn around and talk to Workspaces Core in the cloud. Clients, gateways, don't change. Users, administrators don't have to learn anything new. And if you are going from physical desktops or you just have new users, you get to pick your favorite VDI vendor who has the use cases you need. As we go into Lucid Motors, what we're going to see is they picked VMware and Horizon. And I'm going to turn it over now to Ananda, who's going to tell you all about it. And if you know Lucid Motors, you know they like to go fast. So listen to his story about how fast they migrated to Workspaces Core.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
At Lucid, our dream is to build the best cars in the world for the world. And we build everything in Arizona, designed in California. So, losing a day of productivity in this phase of our business, it means a huge impact. My name is Ananda Krishnan. My team is responsible for all the enterprise, factory, and cloud infrastructure and operations at Lucid. So we came across this challenge, a few months ago or a couple of months ago. We got to get some of our remote users migrated to more controlled environments so that we can protect our, IP. And so I'm happy to, share some of that experience with you guys. So thank you for joining. Yeah, as I said, the primary objective for this initiative was protecting some of our intellectual property, mostly limiting third-party users bringing their own device, accessing directly all our resources, and be able to transfer any data to their device and walk away with it. So we had very little time to go and run through this migration. We wanted to achieve this with minimal upfront cost because obviously purchasing hardware and deploying it on-prem and bringing the whole new experience for the users is going to take some time, and we wanted to keep this more seamless and faster for the users. And most of these users were in different regions. Some of them are in remote North America, many of them in Asia Pacific and Europe. And so we got to be able to run these instances close to them to give them the best experience. And shipping devices to these users, to protect our assets was, not obviously a choice because it's going to take time, it's more expensive. And so we started looking at, how do we solve this with virtual instances? After we looked at a few technologies, we chose VMware with Workspace core, which was, what, as Kevin mentioned, brings the flexibility and the choice and protect some of our existing investment. So we had a large investment on VMware, and so we wanted to protect that as well with our existing skill set. People could manage them. So what we did was we leveraged Horizon running in AWS, as Kevin said, using the Workspace APIs to be able to launch these instances in a hybrid architecture. And we were able to get at least 900 instances in less than 30, 40 days. And that's the speed that we had to go, and we were able to achieve that. And this hybrid architecture using the BLAST protocol means we could also use smaller instances. We didn't need bigger CPU and memory intensive instances. And so that definitely helped us to reduce or control some of the cost. And running the VMware Workspace core in AWS with existing infrastructure that's already in AWS, like our enterprise applications or some of our engineering tools, and then also providing that access through Direct Connect to our on-prem infrastructure through, like our design applications was seamless. And so I wanted to obviously highlight that we leverage the virtual instances just as like any other standard desktops. So we use a very basic image, and we provision this for the user, and then everything from there was using existing tools like 10em, Netscope, or whatever that we use for other desktop protection. And we were able to run software installs and give the self-service to the users to be able to install their own applications. So we had much more control on these instances. And of course, we're going to, also leverage some on-prem infrastructure. That's one of the reasons why we choose the hybrid model in order to be able to deploy the VDIs on AWS as well as on-prem. And so we didn't get there, just on day one. Obviously, we ran through some of the challenges, and I wanted to highlight and maybe use, give those as, for some of your considerations. We need to size the VPCs right. Obviously, these are VDIs. They can grow really fast, and as how we've grown from one instance to 900 instances in 30 to 40 days, they could grow really fast. So you want to be sizing your VPCs right, so you don't have to redeploy, reconfigure your instances later. And you want to also have a different user profiles. If you understand some of your users, whether they are corporate users just accessing SaaS applications, or maybe more engineering developers who need more powerful CPU or GPU-based instances. And so you want to clearly have a strategy on grouping some of these users into specific instance types so that you can provision them from day one. Because reconfiguring them might add up to the cost and some of your other challenges. And we also have to have more clear data protection strategy. So in Lucid, what we did was, as I said, we wanted to leverage this as a standard desktop, and we encouraged users to use this as a non-persistent instance, even though Workspace Core is a persistent instance. We wanted to use the OneDrive as their primary storage for most of their content, so they're able to move from one instance to another if we have to migrate them. So those are kind of some of the challenges that we ran into. Then I would recommend you to consider upfront before you start working on the workspace migration. So what does this mean? And so, obviously, we had this challenge in front of us. We had to move fast. And in fact, we were able to get there at least 3 months ahead of time. With just simple PowerShell, other scripts, we leveraged hundreds of instances every day, every week. And in a matter of a few weeks, we've got all our users transition to VDI. And they were all up and running from day one. I mean, there are a few issues where they may had some SSO, other type of challenges, but VDI has been, seamlessly working for most of our users. And it also helped us to avoid the upfront investment, because one of the key objectives for us was, this is an area that we are moving in, and we didn't want to, buy expensive hardware and deploy on-prem. And so VDI gave us the flexibility to be able to, start with few users and continue to grow. And then we just, made use of the whole environment and grow fast. And we were also able to optimize some of our third-party licenses. So with traditional desktops, you might be aware some of the, Office 365 and Microsoft licensing models. And so we were able to optimize those. And existing skills, we had both AWS and VMware skills. So that helped us to get this all wrapped up quickly and be able to launch all these instances much faster. And we continue to, obviously expand the role. Right now, most of these users are corporate users. They are accessing their SaaS applications, like Teams, email, or some financial applications. And there are now a lot more interest into more developers and designers wanting to look at VDI. And so we are looking at different profiles and continue to expand how we can, bring all of them into a controlled environment. We're also very delighted with, the SSO and the MFA and using existing global policy GPOs. How we control all these users being able to, access applications, transfer files, and be able to actually share any information with the other colleagues using OneDrive. So it just worked out very well. So there are a few areas that we want to continue to work on. We got here so fast, and now we need to scale, optimize, and run this efficiently. So our team's going to be working on automating some of these deployments through workflow integration. If you use service management tools like ServiceNow or Jira, we want this to be a seamless process with our end users, just requesting a VDI and they get it in 15 minutes, versus might take an hour or two for the admins to provision them. And then we also want to bring in as much as more health data from the VDI instances, so we could be proactively reaching out to the users, and if their instance is unhealthy, and be able to actually reset it or take care of it for them. And we need to work on some patching, because like I said, it's a traditional desktop, and you use different tools for patching these desktops. They have vulnerabilities every week. And so we'll be working on, obviously automating some of those patching in the next few weeks, so we protect these instances. And we want to, as I said, expand the usage to more GPU-based VDIs. This is especially for some of our designers at Lucid Motors. We have corporate users, designers, and developers. It's like a technology organization, even though we are in the automotive. And so we'll be expanding some of those instances to those design teams. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening in. I want to have Gigi deeper dive into the workspace core, and we'll answer any questions later.
Thank you. Thank you, Ananda. Hi, everyone. My name is Gigi Behringer, and I think I know how to work this. Great. My name is Gigi Behringer. I'm one of the senior product managers that focuses on Amazon Workspaces core. Get the pleasure to work with Kevin every day, and also get to work with Ananda on this deployment. So I think what's really interesting about the Lucid use case, the Lucid Motors use case, is we say, right, we'll meet you wherever you are. And we can meet you wherever you are. We can meet you if you're on-prem still, if you're partially on-prem, if your aim is to be 100% in the cloud starting from scratch. With Lucid, you guys had, what? You had employees bringing laptops into the office.
Third-party laptops.
Third-party laptops. And they had, they could choose anything. What they wanted was something that they could deploy quickly. They wanted a protocol that would give the functionality that they wanted, Blast protocol. They had IT admins that preferred Horizon 8 because they were comfortable with it, correct? Yes. And so it made a lot of sense. And they looked at their options, and this turned out to be the perfect fit, right? They could deploy, I think there are over 1,000 instances in 45 days at this rate, and their users are loving it so much. We heard rumors that when the POC was going, people were knocking on your door to get access to it because it was such a pleasant experience.
That's right. When we started, we were targeting a specific user or use cases, and then the other engineering and different teams, came to know about it, and suddenly that's how we grow from, because our target was like maybe 600 instances for the first month, and then we grow to 1,000 within a few weeks. Yeah.
If that's not a good customer quote, I don't know what is. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me there. So we really can meet you wherever you are. In their use case, it was very specific to starting from scratch in that sense, but also having licenses and an attachment to Horizon 8. We can meet you on-prem, right? You can bring those licenses with any of our partners that we're integrated with that you might use on-prem to use on Workspaces core, have a seamless, admin panel or admin console for your IT staff, but then also a seamless experience for that migration for your end users. The hybrid deployment opportunity comes into play with, if you're slowly migrating, if you want a DR scenario in the cloud, if you want a DR scenario flipped around on-prem, because if the internet blows up and you need it right next to you, right? But then you also have that bursting opportunity, which we've seen a lot of customers come to us with, where maybe they're really maxing out and they already have licenses, but they don't have physical capacity. And so that makes a lot of sense, and I think is kind of one of those sweet spots that we've definitely found. Moving into kind of what Kevin mentioned, what the benefits are for core, diving a bit more into what that looks like, right? It's easy to deploy and scale. We heard that already from Lucid Motors. You're able to deploy onto AWS's global infrastructure. That's the classic spiel of the benefits of AWS. You might be here today because of that. But then it's also that purpose-built technology. So over the last 5-10 years or so, I'd say AWS continues to lean into that managed service opportunity. Workspaces core is the in-between piece where you have the managed API, but then you're bringing that technology you prefer on top. And so with that, it's reducing the learning curve because you're already having that admin console remain the same, but at the same time, you're benefiting from the managed API, which I'll dive into in a few minutes. Lastly, that optimized spending opportunity here specifically is pay-as-you-go with no upfront fees, pretty classic for us. But even better is that if you were to run any of our VDI options on EC2 instead of us, you would have to, figure out EC2, figure out EC2 spending, potentially make reserved or buy reserved instances or a savings plan, and all of that's really managed for you by us. And I think that takes a load off, potentially undifferentiated heavy lifting, like we like to say, of your team having to figure out which EC2s are the correct fit, but then also how to make sure you're not overspending when you do migrate over to us. Nope, that's the wrong button. There we go. There is a laser pointer on this if you need it. Oh. Great. So what we mean by managed makes a difference, right? So we have that pay-as-you-go option. What this ties into nicely, I think, is hitting the compute resource pool line halfway down. You have the pay-as-you-go. Those EC2 options are chosen for you, just like with regular workspaces. You have, performance bundles, you have standard bundles, you have graphics bundles to choose from, et cetera. And all of those are EC2 instances specifically chosen for backing VDI workloads. But in addition to that, those EC2s are purchased by us, so that way we can give you what ends up being roughly a 20% discount on what that compute power would normally cost, because we're buying in such bulk compared to what you would purchase from EC2. Moving down, and just to kind of run through these, so we have that the desktop compute resource model is what we call t-shirt sizing. It's that bundling that I mentioned. You're able to bring now your M365 licensing, which we'll hit on at the end of this presentation with details. That's an announcement as of August 1 that you may have heard of. I think that was one of the reasons that you guys were also kind of excited to choose Workspaces core.
Yeah, the overall total cost of ownership made sense, yeah.
It makes a lot of sense when you can choose potentially a different option because of being able to bring it over to us instead of having to choose a more expensive licensing agreement. With that, we have Windows 10 and 11 onboarding. So that onboarding process of bringing your BYOL licenses for Windows 10 and 11, but then also having a managed uploading experience that we're continuously improving on with our engineering team. And so what you're able to do when you onboard onto Workspaces core is bring that license, bring an image. It does have to be able to get through, sysprep and all the requirements. But that process is aided by tools that our engineering team has made to help simplify, and as we grow as a service, continue to make that more pleasant. That compute resource pool, like we said, we're buying at capacity that is so much larger than I think most or any of AWS customers are able to purchase at, and so we're able to pass that discount on to you. The rebuild and restore features when it comes to the 12-hour snapshotting that we're able to do, those managed pieces of the API that you might get with a fully managed service, like Amazon Workspaces, the native product, are also passed on to you. Lastly, and I think this is one that really hits home when we talk to customers during the week, you see focused support from AWS. And so if you were to launch a virtual desktop on EC2, and someone were to have an issue with that desktop, you would then have to reach out to support, but that support is EC2 support. That is not end user computing support, that's not our end user computing support organization, right? And so they can tell you some, but they're not gonna be able to tell you everything that the support team that has access, like a managed service support team has access. In addition to that, those support teams are already integrated with our partner support teams. So you have an issue with your Horizon 8 instance, you reach out to VMware and say, this isn't working. They are already talking to our support team and able to say, I'm sending you a customer over, it's not on our side, can you take a look? And that whole experience becomes more pleasant, but also more streamlined, and makes your life easier if you have end users that are having an issue and you have that whole system behind you to support you. You're not kind of lost and having to just rebuild and hope it doesn't happen again. Great. So what does our global footprint look like today with Workspaces Core? We currently have 14 regions that we're live in. So we're live in almost every region that Amazon Workspaces native is live in. We are continuously growing. If you haven't heard before, we really choose these based on customer need. And so if you are a customer of ours, if you do have an account team you work with, tell them if we're not somewhere you need us. And we can look at it, we can work with you to identify how quickly we can get into that region. And I think that's something really special about how close our PM team and our product team in general is to the customers that we work with, especially as we are a new service. We're excited to hear those use cases, hear those stories about where you need us, why you need us. You'll see here we are spread out in North America, South America, EMEA, all the way over in APAC, up and down from over in Singapore down to Sydney. We span the globe, and we span the globe partially because you need us right there, partially because it just makes sense to have your virtual desktops close to your applications and close to your people, right? You can only go as fast as physics will allow you, and we don't want you to try to beat physics. We don't want you to try to beat the speed of light. We want you to be able to build where it makes sense for you. And so far, this is where we've launched, but we're excited to keep launching and expanding. So diving into who those partners are that I mentioned earlier. Right now, we're integrated and general accessibility with 3 partners. One you've heard about today, which is VMware, specifically Horizon 8 on Workspaces Core. Our other 2 partners that we're also seeing a lot of success with and a lot of benefits from for the end users are WorkSpot and LeoStream. So between these 3, I really like that they each make sense in certain situations. They all make sense for a lot of situations, but we want to continue to give you that customer choice that we promise. We don't want to force you onto one. If one of these 3 makes sense, if using our native product for some end users makes sense, it all can be done, and you're all using that AWS backbone to keep everything close to where it should be. In addition to that, we have that fully managed infrastructure that adds the benefits of an AWS managed API. But like I've said, that console that is the same for the IT admins, but also the same for the end users. With the rapid deployment, like you've heard from Ananda, that was 1,000 almost in 45 days, roughly.
That's right.
We could probably look back and count exactly. But then that consistent end user experience, the easy management, no retraining. We really are hearing so many customer stories that no retraining and the seamless experience does really make an impact and makes everyone a little happier when you don't have complaints coming in during that migration. Lastly, I'm gonna pass it off to Kevin to talk about what's coming soon with our partner Citrix.
So we talked about customer choice. And you told us loud and clear that you may have a different VDI provider than the 3 we were choosing. You may have seen a YouTube video from Citrix. It's a really, really handsome gentleman is in that YouTube video. And me explaining that Citrix is coming soon, so stay tuned. I do want to point out while we're here, we have representatives from VMware in the audience who are more than happy to also tell you from their side how they like the partnership. But stay tuned on the Citrix and any other partner you want us, you come talk to us, and this is proof that we listen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think just to point out, we also have representatives from Leo Stream, if that is of interest as well. So he's raising his hand now, if you're interested. VMware, do you want to raise your hands real quick so they know where to find you? I think what I really love about AWS currently is our focus on that integration with different partners. We continue to want to offer options. This service itself can even, and it almost makes more sense to go back real quick. This service itself even makes sense as if you are a VDI provider and want to integrate with us, you can, right? This service is for builders. The integration documentation is available publicly. It doesn't have to be, a slow partnership process. You can just do it. And we're happy to help and we're excited to hear about it, but it's that flexibility that I think is a massive value add. All right, continuing on. So I touched on this briefly earlier. If you weren't aware of the details of our M365 announcement on August 1st, you are now able to bring your licenses over specifically to Amazon Workspaces and Amazon Workspaces Core. And so what that means is, if you're looking to use virtual desktops on, say, EC2, you cannot bring your M365 licenses like you can for us. And that's been a differentiator in decision making, but it's also, I think, helped a lot with that total cost of ownership, like Ananda said.
That's right.
So you can bring, the details are up there, and we'll be around after to answer any questions. We also have documentation online for specifics, but you can simplify that VDI migration, and I think we had a long line of customers hoping for this that are working to migrate over to us later, probably next year since it's almost December. A few more details about what we have going on this week, and then I actually have a few questions for Ananda. But just to give a few pieces of information while we're going over overall information. We have a few activities this week. Keeps changing on me, apologies. First, we have launched a new thin client demo that is available in the AWS Village. We do have a reception that I think is on Wednesday night, and so definitely be sure to hit that up. This is changing on me, so I'm going to leave that slide and ask Ananda a few questions, if that makes sense, or maybe we can head back to your architecture even.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Yeah? Great. We're getting a bit casual, but that's okay. So I think one thing that's worth noting with your architecture is you guys were able to, and we're getting there, you were able to build it in a way that was highly available and scalable, partially because of your own architecting, but then also partially because of it being a managed service. And so how did you decide on, right now it's 2 AZs, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's automatically 2 AZs when you launch with Workspaces Core. That is a benefit of it being a managed service. But how did you decide what level you needed for the POC versus for going GA with end users when it comes to scalability and availability?
Right. As I mentioned, some of our users are in different regions. Mm-hmm. And so we tested this, obviously, with the US West, with just the 2 AZs. And then, once we know how to scale this, then we built another region in Mumbai and, other locations. Even though I call that high availability, but these instances tied to a particular AZ. So we kind of distributed our users across multiple AZs or regions. So when there is an issue, that you're not impacting all your end users, right? And if you're in a real case that you have to migrate them from one AZ to another AZ or region, it would look like just relaunching their desktops, and most of them have their data on OneDrive, and then it'll be a seamless experience for them to just start using their virtual desktop.
Got it. And on the architecture, you have enterprise applications and engineering applications. How did you decide which bundle types to use? Or what kind of bundle types were you looking at for those specific engineering applications to make it performing at the level the engineers
So
need?
that's where we spend most of the time in the first few weeks, testing with the real users on the applications they needed to install on these instances, and then monitor their performance and experience. And then we had resized some of those instances, and then eventually we created 2 or 3 different profiles. And they tried to, anywhere from 2 CPU to 8 CPU type of instances. And the admin team now has pretty much figured out how to automate these for the different profile users based on their Active Directory groups or the user groups they belong to.
Got it. Is that a self-service mechanism at this point?
Not yet. So that's one of the areas where we're going to invest on automating it through ServiceNow. So once they select what their department or the profile is, it would automatically launch their instance with the right profile, whether it is a 2 CPU or 8 CPU or a GPU instance in the future.
Very nice. Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind that was a hiccup that you overcame with architecting?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, some of the areas where we struggled early on was the type of instances and the data protection strategy. Because, we've tested for a few weeks, and then, we realized that relaunching these instances means losing some of the data that they store on the instance drive. And so that's when, we spend some time in strategizing, utilizing the OneDrive, and how to protect some of the data. In fact, we deploy some of our standard protection tools on these desktops like Dhruva, and that takes care of some of the critical data if the user needs to configure and want to protect some of their files as well if it's not in the OneDrive. So for us, it's just seamless for the end user, whether they use their physical desktop or the virtual desktop. It just looks same.
Oh, wow.
From logging in through their single sign-on application, they just see a new checklist and just click on it, and they have their virtual desktop, and then they're able to get up and running in a few minutes.
Got it. What did the integration process look like for you all for connecting your AWS environment to your VMware?
So initially, we had some challenges in enabling the true SSO. I think the team figured out after a couple of weeks, but now when they launch their instance, they just have to, once they authenticate it to their single sign-on portal, they're able to get all the way to the VDI without having to prompt for another password or something. So initial challenges were some, I think it just has to with some two-way SSL or some, API integration, but we've overcome, and it's been sorted out.
And quickly. You've overcome it quite quickly. I'm curious, Kevin, if there's any thoughts you wanted to chime in here.
Yeah, so it was a combination, I think, of VMware team and our solution architects that we both had to sit down with Lucid Motors and make sure we got it right before we even got started. I think that was part of what made it go so fast. And the fact that we'd seen this all before. So that may look daunting to you, that architecture slide out there. I can promise you that this is, people on both sides speak this language and can translate that and make it super simple for you. We wanted to detail everything in there, but this isn't as complicated as you think it is, proven by the fact that how quickly we get these customers up and running and continuing to go. Any ongoing things you want to talk about?
Yeah, as I said, on-prem, we have some of the internal and MFG applications. So many of our manufacturing applications are very latency sensitive, right? So they need to be close to the actual servers or the OT devices that's running. So now we are able to deploy some of those instances on-prem in our factory, close to the, our manufacturing devices, and be able to give people access to, get the work done. So that's one of the area. And then the GPU, some of design teams would like to cut down on their massive desktops that they have been leveraging for all these years. And we want to obviously support the remote designers and across the globe to be able to access our design applications and provide that even for non-prem users to cut some of our physical desktop costs.
So when we say we're going to meet you where you are, this is what we mean. They have users that still should remain on-prem, using the same VMware Horizon from on-premises to the cloud as hardware refreshes on-premises with these expensive workstations that they have. They've got the choice to do a GPU up in the cloud. You, as head of global infrastructure and cloud, get to make those decisions. It's not, you don't need us to make those for you. This is all you right here, and you can do it at your own pace. I think that is one of the key takeaways of this.
Yeah, it just worked out for us because of some of the immediate solutions that were available, and so we were able to move quickly. And I'm happy to share some of that experience with you guys.
We are just about at time.
You got it.
And I know people have sessions to spring.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I'm glad you got up early in this Vegas baby morning. And if you're like every other session, there's 3 or 4 of you who didn't want to ask a question in front of everybody else, so you can catch us on the way out the door. We'll hang out there after the session is over. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Gigi.